Welcome to EduCasts, home of EduCasters. For generations, the predominant view in educational psychology, particularly in the early 20th century, placed the learner squarely at the center of the developmental stage. Theories like those championed by Jean Piaget suggested that children essentially construct knowledge in isolation, following a biologically predetermined timeline of cognitive milestones. Meanwhile, the behaviorists, taking a different tack, argued that learning was merely a response to external stimuli, a process of conditioning. Both perspectives, for all their foundational contributions, ultimately missed the boat on a crucial variable: the inherently social and cultural nature of human thought. The Soviet psychologist Lev Simonovich Vygotsky, 1896 to 1934, despite his tragically short lifespan, came along and completely flipped the script. His revolutionary sociocultural theory, SCT, provides a powerful, compelling framework that argues that human cognition is not an isolated, individual enterprise, but rather a profoundly social one. Vygotsky's central, unwavering contention is that children learn and develop cognitive structures through interactions with their surrounding culture and community. Every function in the child's cultural development appears twice, first on the social level and later on the individual level. This insight shifts the focus from the individual mind to the dynamic interplay between the person and their social environment. The stakes are high. If we accept Vygotsky's premise that our minds are shaped by the tools, language, and social practices we inherit, the implications for education are nothing short of transformative. This essay aims to meticulously unpack Vygotsky's core theoretical concepts, including the genetic law of development, the role of cultural mediation, the centrality of language, and, perhaps most famously, the zone of proximal development, ZPD. Furthermore, it will dedicate substantial space to tracing how these concepts translate into effective, real-world educational practices, cementing the theory's position as a cornerstone of modern pedagogy. Vygotsky's theory is often considered a form of social constructivism, but it distinguishes itself by elevating the concept of mediation. He argued against the idea that the child's mind simply develops organically, or that it is merely a product of stimulus-response chains. Instead, Vygotsky posited that human cognitive abilities, what he called higher mental functions, HMFs, such as voluntary attention, logical memory, and abstract thought, are mediated by tools and signs, which are themselves cultural products. A. The genetic law of development, the interpsychological to intrapsychological shift. The bedrock of SCT is the general genetic law of cultural development, which states, every function in the cultural development of the child appears twice, first on the social level and later on the individual level. First, between people, interpsychological, and then inside the child, intrapsychological. This law fundamentally challenges the notion of learning preceding development. For Vygotsky, social learning is the essential mechanism driving cognitive development. Think of a toddler learning to point. Initially, the pointing gesture is simply an unsuccessful attempt to grasp an object. A caregiver sees this failed attempt and interprets it as a request, thereby giving the gesture its social meaning, interpsychological. Only after the child has internalized this social interpretation does the pointing become a genuine, intentional act of communication and a tool for their own thought, intrapsychological. The interaction, not the biological impulse, creates the cognitive function. The child, in essence, catches on to the cultural meaning embedded in the social exchange, which then structures their internal thought processes. B. Cultural tools. The technical and the psychological. Vygotsky's conception of culture goes far beyond simple traditions or customs. Culture is the repository of tools that humanity has developed over millennia to master the world and, more importantly, to master themselves. He categorized these mediators into two main types. 1. Technical tools. These are tools aimed at acting on the physical environment, things like hammers, plows, calculators, and computers. They facilitate our control over nature. 2. Psychological tools, signs. These are tools aimed at acting on the self and others, tools for thought, memory, and communication. The most crucial of these is language, but the category also includes numbering systems, algebraic symbols, mnemonic devices, artistic conventions, and maps. The psychological tools are the key to Vygotsky's framework. They fundamentally rewire our cognitive apparatus. Learning the multiplication table, for example, is not just memorization. It is the acquisition of a psychological tool, a sign system, that allows for vastly more complex mathematical thought than would be possible through natural, unmediated memory. In a sense, these tools are what make us human thinkers, allowing us to rise above the purely natural or elementary mental functions we share with other primates. The master tool, language, speech, and thought. If culture is the engine of development, language is the transmission fluid. Vygotsky saw language not just as a means of communication, but as the single most powerful psychological tool that dictates how HMFs are structured and executed. He provided a refined, nuanced view of the developmental path of speech, distinguishing between three major forms. A. Social speech. This is the earliest form of speech, used purely for external communication, to control the behavior of others, and to express simple thoughts and emotions. When a child asks, "Can I have that toy?" they are engaging in social speech. It is fundamentally interpersonal and focused outward. This type of speech is crucial because it is the initial entry point for all cultural learning. It's where the child first gets in sync with the thought patterns and language structure of their community. B. Private speech, egocentric speech. Vygotsky's analysis of this stage offers one of his most powerful counterpoints to Piaget. Piaget viewed the child's seemingly nonsensical talking to themselves, egocentric speech, as a sign of cognitive immaturity, a temporary phase where the child cannot yet take the other's perspective. Vygotsky saw it entirely differently. He argued that private speech is a vital transitionary mechanism, speech for the self, that children use to regulate their own behavior, plan tasks, and solve problems. For example, a child building a tower might mutter to themselves, "The red block goes next. Oops, too tall, needs a wider base." This externalized self-talk is a tool for cognitive control. It serves as an audible bridge between fully social speech and internalized thought. It's the child working things out loud, a necessary step before they can truly think things through silently. As they get older, the speech is whispered, then mumbled, and eventually it disappears. C. Inner speech, thought. The final stage is inner speech, which is fully internalized, silent, and abbreviated. This is the sophisticated, compressed form of verbal thought we use as adults. Vygotsky noted that inner speech is not simply external speech minus sound. It is predicative. It often lacks subjects and is focused on the meaning of words, not their phonetic structure. It is the language of thought itself. The progression from social speech, retrospeech, private speech, inner speech illustrates Vygotsky's genetic law perfectly. External social interaction, speech used to communicate, becomes internalized, private speech used to regulate, and ultimately forms the very structure of internal thought, inner speech. This is where the power of the theory really kicks in. The language we use with others becomes the language we use to think. The educational nexus. The zone of proximal development, ZPD. The zone of proximal development, ZPD, is arguably Vygotsky's most impactful concept for the field of education. It is not merely a metaphor. It is a diagnostic and pedagogical tool that redefines how we measure learning and potential. Vygotsky defined the ZPD as the distance between the actual developmental level as determined by independent problem solving and the level of potential development as determined through problem solving under adult guidance or in collaboration with more capable peers. The ZPD is conceptualized as having three distinct, crucial regions. 1. Actual developmental level, what I can do. Tasks the learner can perform completely independently and successfully. This is the knowledge they have already mastered. 2. Zone of proximal development, what I can do with help. Tasks the learner cannot yet do alone. but can accomplish with the guidance and support of a more knowledgeable other. MKO. This is the sweet spot for instruction, where learning and development actually happen. 3. Beyond the ZPD, what I cannot do. Tasks that are too difficult, even with assistance. These tasks are developmentally inappropriate and may cause undue frustration. The ZPD is a radical departure from traditional testing. A standardized test only measures the actual level of development. Vygotsky argued that this is an incomplete picture. Two children might test at the same actual level, but if one can solve much harder problems with assistance, a larger ZPD, that child's developmental potential is much higher. The ZPD focuses on emergent potential, making it a dynamic, forward-looking assessment tool. The entire purpose of the educational environment is to continually identify and operate within the student's ZPDs. Scaffolding, the practice of teaching within the ZPD. Teaching effectively within the ZPD demands a specific instructional technique known as scaffolding. While Vygotsky didn't coin the term, it was later introduced by Jerome Bruner, David Wood, and Gail Ross. The concept perfectly captures the essence of ZPD-based instruction. Scaffolding is not simply giving hints or simplifying the task. It is the systematic, contingent, and temporary support provided by an MKO, teacher, parent, or peer, that allows the learner to successfully complete a task they couldn't manage alone. This support is analogous to the temporary structures built around a building under construction. They are essential for the building process, but are removed once the structure can stand on its own. Key characteristics of effective scaffolding include: 1. Contingency. The MKO must constantly adjust the level of support to match the learner's moment-to-moment performance. If the learner struggles, the MKO steps up. If the learner progresses, the MKO fades back. It's like meeting the student where they are. 2. Fading. As the learner gains competence, the MKO gradually withdraws the support, transferring the responsibility for the task entirely to the student. This is the point where the learning moves from the interpsychological, shared, to the intrapsychological, individual. 3. Recruitment and direction maintenance. The MKO must first interest the child in the task, and then keep them focused and motivated toward the goal. This often involves clear goal setting and breaking the task into manageable sub-goals. Scaffolding is a dynamic, fluid process. When implemented correctly, it helps the learner get over the hump of a challenging skill, ensuring that they are constantly exposed to problems just slightly out of reach of their current abilities.